Spark the brain, 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 spark the brain. We here. Spark the brain, spark the brain, spark the brain. It's the third round, RPB. I don't know if they ready for this one, man. You gotta switch it up on them a little bit. You know what I'm talking about? Have a seat at the master's table. We ain't asked for no seat. We went and built up our own. You see, it's rather stable. You got 2 eyes, 2 ears, you know the rest. Look, listen, and observe, but also respect. In God we trust. It's obvious. The money ain't the root of all evil, but lack thereof. That's why they deprive you of resources. Why they focus on streams of income, at least 3 sources. We certified, we solidified. And they say they created hip-hop, but all that shit is lies. Cause every element came before the development of what we callin' hip-hop now. It's all relevant to all the topics we gon' touch on. Spoiler alert, as you play this album, ain't no club songs. Boy, that hurt, but this ain't no conscious album. It's just that real shit, that Black God mantra album. I hope y'all feel this. Spark the brain, 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 spark the brain. Spark the brain, spark the brain, spark the brain. Spark the brain, spark the brain, spark the brain. Spark the brain, spark the brain, spark the brain. Spark the brain, spark the brain, spark the brain. Spark the brain, spark the brain, spark the brain. My mind is spark the brain, spark the brain.
The masters, the masters, the masters, the masters.
All right, peace, family. Peace, peace. Supreme rising to the family. Supreme rising to the family. I'm on here early this morning. It ain't super early, but you know, I'm not usually broadcasting at this time of the day, but I wanted to come on here real quick. Hopefully, try not to be on here too long. Just to cover this topic, I want to do an update from this past Sunday's broadcast. Me and Nicely Girl did a broadcast this past Sunday, and the title was Woke, A Peculiar Journey of a Word. And so this is kind of like part 2. I wanted to give an update because Nicely has sent me this tweet this morning. Well, I think she sent it to me last night, but I seen it first thing this morning when I got up from the dude Ari. You know, the beat with Ari Melber. He's that news broadcaster who be doing like the hip hop songs. He does kind of almost like a version of Decoded on his show sometimes. You know, I know he did like some Tribe Called Quest lyrics. No, he didn't do Tribe Called Quest lyrics. That's the dude that does the Traffic. I think he did like Traffic breakdown using Tribe Called Quest lyrics. But no, not him. But he did a Most Def joint. I think he did the Rape Over, Most Def, and recently Jay-Z's verse on God Did. He kind of did a breakdown of that a lot of that kind of went viral. A lot of people was talking about when he did that. But yeah, he's this newscaster who's supposed to be kind of like tapped in with hip hop and all of that. And I guess he did an interview with Erykah Badu talking about the term woke. And as you can see, the tweet says Erykah Badu, who first coined the term woke in her 2008 song Master Teacher, rebukes GOP attacks. And I'm not going to play the interview that they did on MSNBC, but I do want y'all to go check it out. I'm not going to play the interview because I know MSNBC is going to flag my video. So I'm not even going to play any clips from the interview that they did, but I'll talk about it. And I do want you guys to go check it out so you can get the full context. But the interview and the subsequent tweet is giving a similar implication to what I was saying on Sunday. You know what I'm saying? On Sunday, I was talking about how I credit Erykah Badu and Georgia Ann Muldrow in particular with popularizing the frame woke or stay woke into our lexicon in modern times. Now, I wasn't saying that she invented it, You know what I'm saying? But the way that we use it, the way that we use the term, or the way that we have used the term, we kind of abandon it now at this point. But the way we started to use the term around 2008, 2009, 2010 came from that song Master Teachers on Erykah Badu's album, is what I was saying. I was saying it wasn't really popular in the lexicon in the way that we started to use it. I wasn't saying that she invented it or she was the first person to ever say it or whatever the case may be. You guys can go back and check the broadcast to get the full context of how I broke that down. But I was saying I trace our usage of that term and the bastardization that we're seeing now with the term back to that particular song on that particular album by Erykah Badu. And I really was crediting Georgia Ann Muldrow, who is featured on the song, without fully knowing the history behind the song. I didn't know, but some of the articles that I'm going to read with y'all today kind of break that down. And I was on point because I was really giving her the credit, because just me as a music fan and as an artist myself, I can kind of reverse engineer the creative process when I'm really listening to a song and when I'm really into a song or a record. I can kind of reverse engineer and get some type of idea of the creative process behind the record. And so just listening to the record and loving the song so much, I love that whole album, by the way. Erykah Badu is absolutely one of my favorites, and that's one of my favorite albums that she made. And so just analyzing that record, I was able to deduce that Georgia Ann Muldrow was really the driving force behind the record. I felt like she's the one that created, like I said Sunday, the meat and potatoes of the song. And one of the articles that I'm going to read to you guys really confirms that. And so I was definitely on point with my assumption. It was just an assumption, like I said, just based on me listening to the record, analyzing the record. And I was like, I kind of know Erykah Badu, the way her mind works, you know what I'm saying, creatively. And I wasn't really familiar with Georgia Ann Muldrow before the record. And so I was giving her the credit for basically the concept of the record and the use of the term stay woke. I was giving her the credit. So really, it was like her song that Erykah Badu was featured on, but it's on Erykah Badu's album, being that she was the more popular artist. But like I said, one of the articles that I'm going to read to y'all kind of breaks that down and confirms my theory on that. And so supreme rising to y'all, man, who are tapped in with me this morning, and salute to everybody who's checking this out on the replay. What I need y'all to do is hit the like button, share this out on your social media platforms. Let everybody know that I'm live right now, family. It's going to be a pretty good chop up. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible, but I wanted to read a couple of these articles to you and give my take and do an update from the show that we did on Sunday. All right. So let me see. Where should we start? This was the tweet. So go check out the tweet. Check out the thread inside the tweet. Some interesting back and forths going on in the thread inside the tweet. And I'll read some of the articles to you, but there's a couple of more articles out there that I'm going to suggest for you guys. I'm not going to be able to read them all this morning, but I would suggest a couple of more articles for you guys to go check out. And so I'm going to start here. I'm going to start here. I think it's a place to set things off at. So, yeah, now let me close this. Close that one. It looks like y'all can't see that pretty good. Are y'all able to see my screen share good? On my side, it looks really tiny. Let me see how it looks. If y'all watching it on the phone, let me see how it looks. It's not bad. It's not bad, especially if you turn your phone on landscape mode, but even regular mode, it's not too bad. You guys can see. You might not be able to read the actual article, but you can see the headline pretty good. Let me see. Keep that like that. I guess it's not too bad. But I want to read the article for y'all is what I want to do. Let me see. I want to read the article for y'all. And so check it out. This is on Legal Defense Fund website. And the topic is how woke went from black to bad, or the headline is how woke went from black to bad. And they're going to do, they're going to trace back the lineage of our uses of the term woke in this article. And so let's go through it. And this is by Aisha Robinson, by the way. Aisha Robinson, I don't know too much about her, but I just did a quick look up. Deputy editorial director. I did a quick just search to see who she was. And she's a non-FBA. She's a Jamaican sister, by the way. So I just want y'all to keep that in mind as we go through this. That's all I know about her. I don't know too much about her background or her politics or anything like that. But I did see that this is a Jamaican sister that wrote the article. And I think that's kind of important to point out because, you know, we're talking about this term woke, and really this is a term, this is something that's part of the FBA vernacular. And a lot of times, you know, our terms and the uses of our terms just gets conflated with just everybody black and then everybody period. Like I was talking about on Sunday, how a lot of our, not just with our language, but a lot of our dances and a lot of our fashion trends and our music and a lot of stuff that begins with us goes through this Hollywood divorce experience once it gets pushed out into the mainstream and becomes co-opted and appropriated and bastardized and then ultimately weaponized against us. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, let's go through this. So we must fight woke, the woke in our schools. We must fight the woke in our businesses. We must fight the woke in government agencies. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis recently declared from the stage at a campaign event, we can never, ever surrender to woke ideology. And I'll tell you this, the state of Florida is where woke goes to die. So his boast about Florida isn't an empty threat. From his powerful pulpit as the state's governor, DeSantis engineered and recently signed into law the Stop Woke Act, a title that precisely captures what the bill's architects aim to do. Stop people in Florida from speaking out in ways that challenge racism and other kinds of discrimination. And so that's important to note, right? And other kinds of discrimination, right? Let's go on. The measure leverages severe penalties, including firing educators and pulling state funding from educational institutions for violations of its intentionally vague yet broad speech and viewpoint limitations, all to brutally chill conversations about racism, gender inequality, and LGBTQ plus people. Now, wasn't I saying this on Sunday about the term woke? The first appropriation of the term, where it went from being something that is used by black folks to just mean being aware, being conscious, and ways to talk about racism and social justice issues and things like that. It became for us, it was a catchphrase that meant, you know, just being conscious, being aware, you know what I'm saying? Having knowledge of self, you know what I mean? And the first appropriation came from the LGBTQ movement, the feminist movement, and some of these other left-leaning so-called progressive movements. They were the first ones that really started to appropriate the term. And I pointed out how Erykah Badu, all the way back in 2016, was saying, I'm no longer woke. Like, she was abandoning the term way back then. And at first I didn't peep game, but I saw what was happening with the term through people like the Black Lives Matter organizations and, you know, people like that. Some of these left-wing Democratic shills and all that started to use the term in a weak way. They started to water it down and attach it to all of these other issues that didn't have to do anything to do with what we were talking about. And then I understood why Erykah Badu was saying what she was saying, right? So I was pointing that out. And the thing that I'm noticing now is they kind of still trying to skip over that part of the game. They're just trying to say the term is being hijacked by the right wingers. There's being hijacked by the DeSantis in the boys, right? But they're skipping over the fact that it was first hijacked and watered down by the Democratic arm of white supremacy. So let's continue with the article. It also prohibits promoting specific phrases and concepts like systemic racism that are critical to explaining how discrimination is perpetuated and to understanding of the impact of inequality on people's everyday lives. So look, they always talking about, again, this is how they hijack our entire movements, right? Through words, right? They're always talking about the struggle of Black folks. They're always talking about everything bad that was done wrong to Black folks in particular. But then they lump in gender inequality, LGBTQ+, and all of these other movements and so-called aggrieved groups that don't have anything to do with the people who are being harmed and aggrieved, right? So they're talking about how we can't use systemic racism. So systemic racism is used to describe what Black people go through. It's used to describe the condition of Black folks in within the system, particularly in the United States, but globally as well, right? So they're saying now we can't say systemic racism, and that kind of cripples the way that we could talk about how discrimination is perpetuated and to understand the impact of inequality. This is a Black issue. This have nothing to do with gender or LGBTQ or anything, right? So anyway, let's continue. The Stop Woke Act threatens not only the free speech and livelihood of teachers, especially Black educators who are more likely to teach subject, especially Black educators, right? Not especially non-gender or whatever other kind of educators they're talking about, especially Black educators who are more likely to teach subjects that involve the prohibited concepts. It will also undeniably damage the quality of education received by all students attending public institutions in Florida. That's why the Legal Defense Fund, along with co-counsel, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU Florida, and Ballot SPAR, I don't know what that is, Ballot SPAR filed suit challenging the law and filed a motion for a preliminary injunction seeking to halt its implementation. The suit argues that the Stop Woke Act is unconstitutional and discriminatory. But don't just take our word for it. Ask yourself, what exactly is the woke? Excuse me. Where did woke come from? And how did it become apparently worthy of gag orders instituted by politicians and administered with the might of the government? When did it transform from its roots in Black American vernacular to a supposedly all-encompassing, terrifying force emblazoned across increasingly fear-mongering headlines in the United States and even now in parts of Europe? Let me read that one part again. When did it transform from its roots in Black American vernacular? So again, this is FBA terminology in its origin, right? And that's an important thing to note, family. Let's not miss that, right? And so we got to be super sophisticated when it comes with this. We have to be super sophisticated. We have to bring attention to the details and the nuances that are happening in this conversation. We have to point out what is not being spoken of, the parts that are being left out of the conversation, that are being intentionally omitted from the conversation. We have to shine light on that. You know what I'm saying? And so let me carry on. Put simpler, how did woke go from meaning Black to bad? The Black lineage of woke. And they have this cartoon here on the side. I don't know if y'all can see it that good. But if you're woke, you dig it. And this is from 1962 in the New York Times. There was an article in the New York Times written by William Melvin Kelly in 1962 in the New York Times, where he uses the term woke. So the title is "If You're Woke, You Dig It." That was written in 1962. So they're saying, you know, this is kind of the origins of the word, and I type agree with that. I agree with that. I don't disagree with it. Let me say that. But again, God is in the nuances. So what I'm saying is the way that the term got populated into the lexicon and the way in which we were using it after Erykah Badu's song is a little bit different than the use of it even in this article that they're pointing out in 1962. And some of the other articles that they point out going back to the early 20s and all of that. Some of the other usages of the term, yes, Black people had already been saying the words woke and stay woke even in certain, not in certain way, but we had already been using it in different ways, but not exactly the way that we began to use it after the song that Erykah Badu made. And so I'm like I was telling y'all on Sunday, I said, if anybody could point it out to me that we were using it before that, then I will stand corrected. And so I'm modifying my stance. I don't fully stand correctly. I still stand on my premise that because what I was saying specifically, and let me be clear, not that they invented the term with that song, but the way that we began to use the term stemmed from that song. I stand on that. But there are more roots and origins to how that term came about, even to get to the point of the way that they used it in that song. And so I agree that this is part of that lineage, this article that they're pointing out and some of the other things that they point out. I agree that all of this is a part of the lineage, but at the same time, I still stand on the fact that we weren't using it the way that we began to use it until that song came out in 2008. So to be woke is to be Black. It's how OK Player, senior news and culture reporter Elijah Watson defined the Black American colloquialism, now broadly used derisively, when he embarked on a journey in 2017 to plot its origins. So this dude, Elijah Watson, who writes for OK Player, and he's the senior news and culture reporter for OK Player. In 2017, he started to write some articles where he was tracing the origins of the term woke. And we're going to get into that in a little bit later, or after I finish this article here. Ironically, his research first turned up a 1962 New York Times essay, "If You're Woke, You Dig It," by the then Harlem-based writer William Melvin Kelly, who was highlighting the phenomenon of Black American slang being appropriated by white people who often missed or altogether distorted the words original meanings. Let me get that right. Let me get that right. I want to be clear. By then, the Harlem-based writer William Melvin Kelly, who was highlighting the phenomenon of Black American slang being appropriated by white people who often missed or altogether distorted the words' original meanings until the idioms were taken over, inevitably transformed, and ultimately abandoned by their original Black creators. This is exactly what I was saying on our Sunday broadcast. And this brother wrote this back in 1962, right? He was already pointing out how words that begin with Black American slang are often appropriated by white people who often missed or altogether distorted the word's original meanings until the idioms were taken over, inevitably transformed, and ultimately abandoned by their original Black creators. And I was pointing that out when I said Erykah Badu made that tweet in 2016, saying she's done with the term woke. That was the beginning of us abandoning that term just a couple of years after we began to use it in the way in which we were using it, right? It had already been taken over because, remember, we're in the quickening. So back then in 1962, it probably took a little longer to go from a term that was used in Black slang to reaching into the mainstream and being appropriated to where we ultimately kind of abandon it. And it doesn't just happen again with our language, but it happens all across the board. I'll give you another example. Air Force Ones. When I was growing up, we called them Uptowns. Air Force Ones, the Nike sneaker Air Force Ones, which are very popular. I think that's the most popular Nike sneaker, right? Back in the days, early 90s, maybe late 80s even, but for me, I would trace it back to the early 90s. It was really a Harlem thing. a Bronx thing where people was wearing Air Force Ones. That's the reason why we called them uptowns. People wasn't even wearing them in other regions across the country. It was just a New York thing, really a uptown thing. So even if you was in Brooklyn or if you was from where I'm from, upstate New York or whatever the case may be, and you were wearing those, we called them uptowns to pay homage to who started the trend. It was Harlem, right? And so that was kind of like our thing. You know what I'm saying? You could kind of identify somebody by the shoes that they had on. Oh, he must be from New York, at least. You might say, oh, maybe he's from Harlem. But if you was in another state or whatever, you could see somebody with a pair of Air Force Ones on and be like, oh, he must be from New York. Right? And so fast forward to when Nelly made the song Air Force Ones, stomping in my Air Force Ones, or however that song went, the sneaker got blown up into the mainstream where everybody and their grandmama started wearing uptowns. And they wasn't even calling them uptowns no more. Now they were called by the term Air Force Ones. We never called them that before. They was always uptowns. Y'all got to give me a pair of uptowns. Very rarely would we use the term Air Force Ones. Let me say that. We knew that that's what they were called, but rarely we would use that. Normally we would say uptowns. After Nelly made the song, it was Air Force Ones, and all these different colorways started coming out. They started remixing them all different type of ways, and then you just started seeing white people wearing them and grandmas wearing them, and everybody started wearing them, and to the point where we didn't even want to wear them no more. They went out of style for a while. Now you could throw on a pair of Air Forces, and they still cool. You know what I'm saying? Particularly if it's just like an all-white pair. The all-black pair got like a negative stigma. If you're wearing an all-black pair of Air Force Ones, they say, you kind of dangerous. You kind of thugged out with a pair of all-black Air Force Ones, right? That got a negative stigma to it. But if you could throw on a pair of off-white Air Force Ones right now, and they cool again. But they're not the hallmark that they used to be in the culture because they got whitewashed. And so that's just another example of how these things happen. Let me carry on with the article, all right? Where was I? Okay. Kelly was prophetic, Watson tells LDF in a recent conversation. We are 6 decades and several cultural lifetimes past when Kelly's essay was published. And as we discuss what's been done to woke in the 21st century, it's hard to disagree. I don't disagree at all. He was on point. The language seems to be modified in 2 ways, Kelly wrote in the 1960s. The first is to give a word already in use its opposite meaning. At one time, the connotation of jive were all good. Now they are bad, or at least questionable. And so, origins of the timeline of the word woke. I don't know how well y'all can see this on your screen, but they have a little timeline thing here. So in 1923, a collection of aphorisms and ideas by the Jamaican philosopher, social activist Marcus Garvey included the summons, "Wake up Ethiopia, wake up Africa." Now here, I kind of question that as being part of the lineage of woke, right? Wake up, to me, that's kind of a separation. There's kind of there's a difference there. Yeah, wake up and woke. I could see how they're trying to tie that in, but I feel like they're trying to crowbar that into the lineage. And again, like I pointed out in the beginning, the author of this article is a Jamaican woman. And so to me, I don't know. Marcus Garvey saying "wake up Ethiopia" is kind of a reach to crowbar that into the origins of the term woke. I don't know about that. I kind of have some reservations about including that in the timeline, but they have it here. And then again in 1940, the Negro United Mine Workers launched a strike in West Virginia against discriminatory pay. A Black union leader speaks about learning they were being paid less than their white counterparts. Quote, "We were asleep, but we will stay woke from now on." Now that I could rock with. He straight up used the term "stay woke." 1940. He said, "We were asleep, but we will stay woke from now on." Now I could rock with this being part of the origin story of the term, yet and still at that time in 1940, he wasn't using it as a catchphrase. That's just the way that Black people talk. Remember, this is in West Virginia, so people down there is kind of Southern and country, right? And so how country people talk is just the way that Black people talk in America sometimes, where we won't even necessarily be using it to talk about racism or social issues. You could literally be talking about being tired and saying, man, I'm a little tired, man, but I got to stay woke to finish this report. Something that you know what I'm saying? Just using it that way. That's just kind of the way that we talk in Black society. But it's not being used as that catchphrase that we've come to know it as, the colloquialism that we've come to know it as in modern times. Well, not modern times, but, you know, in the 21st century, right? And so, but I will credit that with being part of the origin right there. And one right here in 1938, so this was before 1940. A blues musician, Hubby Ledbetter, known as Lead Belly, uses the phrase "stay woke" in a song called the Scottsboro Boys. All right. Now I wasn't aware of this song, but I will credit that with being part of the origin. And he's even using it. Both of them were even using it in a social commentary type of form. And this brother used it in a song. So I definitely give credit to those being part of the origins, because again, this is FBA vernacular that we're talking about. And so the timeline fast forwards to 1962, William Melvin Kelly's article that we talked about in the New York Times. If you're woke, you dig it. Definitely part of the origin story. 1972, author Barry Backham uses the word woke in his 1972 play, Garvey Lives. Now, I don't know how he used the term in there, but I'm sure that it fits along this timeline. It sounds like it would fit along this timeline for sure. 2008 now. Erykah Badu's song, The Master Teacher, uses the lyrics, "Stay woke." 2010, woke undergoes dilution and starts being used broadly as a catch-all to describe social justice. It quickly becomes appropriated and transformed into a negative descriptor for anything having to do with inclusivity and anti-discrimination. Now, this is, to me, what they're saying here. Woke undergoes dilution. I agree with that. But they're not pointing out how so. They're not pointing out how it begins to go through this dilution. They're skipping and going straight to how it's being used as a negative descriptor for anything having to do with inclusivity and anti-discrimination. So they point out that in the 2010s, it begins to get diluted, but they skip over how it gets diluted. And what I'm telling you all is it first began to get diluted by the LGBT community, feminist groups, and Erykah Badu kind of participated in that to a certain degree. I'll point that out in a second. But it first begins to get appropriated by LGBTQ, left-wing propagandists, or Black Lives Matter organizations, which is another branch of the LGBTQ, right? And a lot of these so-called progressive democratic shills. They're the first ones that started to water down the term woke. And the reason why I say Erykah Badu participated in it is because even her in the article, in the interview that she did with the dude Ari, and I want y'all to go check out the interview, she credits herself with the term becoming populated into the masses outside of Black society when she tweeted about a feminist group that was being targeted and discriminated against in Russia. Their name was the Pussy something, the Pussy Riot or something like that. The Pussy something. There's a group in Russia who was being targeted and discriminated against. This was a feminist group. And Erykah Badu tweeted out in support of them. And she used the term "stay woke" in that tweet. And from there, that's when all of these left-wing groups that I'm talking about latched onto it and began to start watering it down. Right? So if we're going to trace it, we're going to have to trace it, and we're going to have to point out the details and the nuances in here. We're not going to just, skip past some of these spots that are being omitted from the conversation. Because now what's happening is the right-wing arm of white supremacy is using the term as a pejorative, and they're using it to get legislation pushed and all of this stuff. And so the left wing of white supremacy is trying to take back control of the narrative around the term, because they want to use the term. They want to use the term to make it an all-inclusive, all lives matter term for all of these other issues. They want to be able to use it to push legislation for the LGBTQ, for the feminists, for women's rights, for immigration, and all this other stuff. So now what we have is the right wing of white supremacy and the left wing of white supremacy fighting over a term that started in foundational Black American society. So now there's infighting going on in white supremacist society over who's going to be in control of appropriating our term, who's going to be in control of weaponizing our language against us. That's what this fight is that we're seeing right now. And so we need to understand where we're supposed to stand within this fight. It's not our fight. Our fight is to take back control of what belongs to us. We need to control the narrative around the term, because what we often do is we just abandon the term. We abandon the fashion trend. We abandon the dance. We abandon the thing that began in our society and allow them to take it over. And we say, we don't want it no more, whatever, they can have it. So instead of us saying they can have it and allowing them to do what they will, we need to take back control of it and ownership of it and say, put our stamp on it and say, it doesn't mean this, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't apply to this, it doesn't apply to that. This is our term. It began with us, and this is what we mean when we say it, period, point blank. That's the stance that we're supposed to have when it comes to this term. So 2017, appearance of Stay Woke as a category on Jeopardy. So you know it really got watered down at this point. That was in 2017. They had a category on Jeopardy called Stay Woke, right? And so they have in 2020, they have a comedy series on Hulu called Woke. And I started to watch it the other day after I finished up the Wu-Tang series, and this one popped up, and I was like, oh, and it was Sunday, right after we finished doing our broadcast about the journey of the woke term. I watched the Wu-Tang series, and then this popped up, and I was like, oh, what's this? And so I started to watch it. It looks like it might be pretty good. I fell asleep on it. I didn't really get all the way into it. It looks like it might be pretty good, but I definitely want to watch it so I can also use it to add on to this conversation, because I have a feeling this is going to be an ongoing conversation that we're going to have. And so in 2022 here, it says Florida Governor DeSantis signs into law the Stop Woke Act. So this is the timeline that they have for it. But again, this timeline skips over the original appropriation and bastardization and watering down of the term by the left wing. They want to put all of the negative stigma on the right wing. But no, it's both of y'all. Both of y'all are in violation of appropriating our term and misusing our term and watering down our term. The left wingers and the right wingers, both of y'all are guilty. And so let me see what y'all talk about in the chat. Peace, what's going on, Nine Nickels? Mama Mysterious, Supreme Rising to you all. Glad y'all tapped in with me early this morning. Make sure that y'all hit the like button and share this out. Let the family know that I'm live and we chopping it up about this woke situation. Mama Mysterious says, I agree. Nine Nickels, we the creators and innovators of everything popping on this soil. That's a fact. Ain't that crazy? Show is stop using on fleek when they started using it. Right. And that's what we do most of the time. We just abandon it. Like the song that I talked about on Sunday with Lil Wayne and Andre 3000 and Hollywood Divorce. If y'all haven't heard that song, go listen to that song after this broadcast. The song is called Hollywood Divorce. Listen to the song, listen to the lyrics. You know what I mean? This is exactly what they're talking about in the song. Starts off like a small town marriage. Lovely wife and life, baby carriage. Now all the stars have cars, Success, of course, but it ends in Hollywood divorce. It's a Hollywood divorce. That's the hook to the song. But listen to the verses. Lil Wayne spazzed on that joint. 3000 spazzed on that joint. But yeah, this is what they're talking about. How things begin in our small little circles. And then once it catches on in the mainstream, we divorce it. We abandon it. We say we don't want it no more. We got to get off of that. We got to get off of that. We got to start putting up the gates and maintaining ownership of the things that originate with us, because it has power. The reason why it's being appropriated is because it has power. They understand the power of it. And so they're taking it and using it for their agenda and for their good. But we need to maintain ownership of it and use it for our empowerment. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not trivial. We think it's nothing because we just come up with these terms and these dances and these fashion trends seemingly out of nowhere. It just comes from us so naturally. We don't think much of it. We don't put much value and stake into it. But we got to change that mentality. We got to start looking at these things as being as powerful and as important as they are, because that's the reason why they're being adopted and appropriated by all of these other people. There's a reason why they're doing it. Not because it's just some bullshit. It's not no bullshit. It's powerful. You know what I mean? And so Michael Harriot, y'all familiar with Michael Harriot. He's a columnist at the Griot. He debated our brother Marcel Dixon about reparations on Twitter sometime last year, whatever the case may be. He got washed, might I add. Marcel Dixon washed him in the debate. But anyway, Michael Harriot, he's the author of upcoming book, Black as Fuck History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America, explains that this kind of insidious takeover and flipping of Black vernacular to anti-Black pejorative has numerous parallels in America's past and runs all the way up to present day. I agree with him on this. He's on point with this right here. When you look at this long arc of history and America's reaction to the request of Black liberation, every time Black people try to use a phrase or coin a phrase that symbolizes our desire for liberation, it will eventually become a cuss word to white people. Harriet says in an interview with the LDF, and Black people have never been silent or at a loss for innovation when articulating demands for justice. In fact, the use of woke as in group signal urging Black people to be aware of systems that harm and otherwise put us at a disadvantage is documented as far back as the 1920s. The Jamaican philosopher Marcus Garvey, exhorting members of the Black diaspora in America, Jamaica, and elsewhere, excuse me, y'all. In America, Jamaica, and elsewhere to join the cause of Pan-Africanism, called on them to wake up by 1938. The iconic American blues musician Lead Belly, born Hubby Ledbetter. Why everybody hitting me up right now? Okay, I'll hit y'all back in a minute, family. I'll hit y'all back in a minute. Had recorded the song Scottsboro Boys. The ballad tells the true story of 4 Black youths who were falsely accused of raping a white woman in Scottsboro, Alabama, and subsequently convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to death. Now, I'm definitely familiar with the Scottsboro Boys story, but I never heard the song. I wasn't familiar with the song before. Though they were thankfully freed after several appeals and trials. In the song, Lead Belly says of Alabama, I advise everybody to be a little careful when they go down there and stay woke. Keep your eyes open. And that's what they're saying now about Florida, right? They're saying NAACP got this thing going on telling Black people not to go to Florida. Right? So the use of the word woke continued to spread throughout all sectors of Black Americans' lives. In 1940, after finding out they were being paid less than their white counterparts, the leader of the Black male mine workers in West Virginia. So basically, they're just breaking down the timeline that I just read to y'all. So I'm going to skip past some of this. Right? Woke almost certainly showed up in everyday conversations of Black people from the South, Midwest, and East Coast, including Harlem. The New York City neighborhood has historically been a Black Mecca, and it's where Kelly first heard the word woke being used in context of the Black Power movement, according to what Watson was told by the writer's surviving family. right? All right. So the world discovers woke. It's perhaps this very context, Black people's awareness of their history and their power to resist injustice, that made woke so ripe for the pernicious mutation it has now undergone. Pernicious mutation it has now undergone. Indeed, the forced transformation of the colloquialism echoes how countless other Black ideas and intellectual contributions have been maligned. When people during the civil rights movement began saying Black power, all of a sudden it became a term that people equated with communism and anti-white sentiment. And then it eventually gave birth to white power, Harriet tells LDF. The 1916 Project, which centers the ramifications of slavery and contributions of Black people in American history, has become an insult. Black Lives Matter became an anti-white sentiment that was banned in school and spawned All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And like Black Lives Matter became known to the world through the power of Twitter, so too has social media aided in the rapid spread of woke and other Black cultural creations beyond the radius of communities in which they were formed. I agree with all of this. Like I said, us being in the quickening with the advent of social media, these terms and trends that we set get appropriated and weaponized faster than they used to now. You know what I'm saying? Because the information spreads so quickly, it immediately gets stolen from us and appropriated by all these other people, right? So we have to be extra diligent about safeguarding and our trends and our terms and things of that nature. So Erykah Badu's 2008 track Master Teacher, featuring spoken word by Georgia Ann Muldrow, is widely credited with the reintroducing Stay Woke to the modern lexicon. However, Watson believes it was Badu's use of the phrase on Twitter while advocating for the freedom of Russian feminist protesters that ultimately helped propel woke around the globe. And even Erykah Badu says that in the interview, y'all, that she did with Ari. She even gives herself credit for that by saying, yeah, when I did that tweet is when it really took off. So when she made the song, it got populated into our lexicon. Our lexicon, it was being used within Black society to mean, again, being aware, having knowledge of self, being conscious of, not only racism, but like she says in the interview, when it comes to staying woke about your health, staying woke about, spiritual principles and all things within your circumference. It just means being aware, right? So that's how we started to use it popularly after the song in 2008. Before that, yeah, you can point out these sporadic uses and where it was, and I will agree that a lot of those are part of the lineage of the term, but really it was the song in 2008, Master Teachers, where we started to use it more frequently and specifically to talk about the consciousness and having knowledge of self and all of that, right? And so the watering down of the term started to happen quickly after Erykah Badu made that tweet about the Russian feminists. So Kelly spoke to this, how these words evolve, says Watson. We see how quick they evolve, even quicker with the advent of social media. It just amplifies the speed in which things no longer belong to the creator, and especially as that pertains to Black people. Of course, because ain't nobody stealing nothing from nobody else like that. The things that these other people, they barely come up with anything. And when they do come up with things, it doesn't have any power. That's the reason why it's always us that's being appropriated. You don't see anybody appropriating nobody else's culture like that. We see this with our dances, with our language. What starts off as ours quickly becomes appropriated. Facts. Add in the traditional media outlets that ran articles presenting woke as trendy new slang for readers to add to their vocabularies, and spread appropriation and ultimate dilution of woke was practically guaranteed. I agree with that 100%. Once they got a hold of it, it was a wrap. And Erykah Badu, I will give her credit. She peeped game early. She was tweeting in 2016, I'm done with that word. It's over for that word. It's a wrap. She knew what time it was. To some, woke is now a derisive stand-in for diversity, inclusion, empathy, and yes, blackness. So when the legislators pass a law to stop woke in light of the words true history as well as its commonly understood meaning, what are they really saying? I don't know who they're quoting right there, but somebody said that. Racial reckoning and racial backlash. But who is culpable for the especially feverish escalation around the word woke that has noticeably peaked following 2020's racial justice reckoning? At the time, inspired a groundswell of interest among Americans seeking to learn more about systemic racism and the history of anti-blackness in this country. The answer, of course, includes politically motivated elected officials and other bad actors seeking to fearmonger and hold back racial justice progress. But it also goes beyond that. And so again, they're leaving out how it first began with the left-wing propagandists. They started it. The only reason why the right-wingers are now using it as a pejorative is because of the way in which the leftists started to use it. The leftists started to use it as a catch-all phrase for all of these other issues and to push all of these other issues politically. Like I said, the LGBTQ, these feminist stuff, these women rights stuff that the right wing is staunchly against, right? Teaching about LGBTQ issues in schools and all of that stuff, abortion and all of this stuff that the right wing is against. The left wingers were appropriating our term to push these issues. And so that's the reason why the right wingers attacked the word and took ownership of the word and used it as a pejorative. They weren't, when we were using it the way that we were using it on the grassroots level, the right wingers didn't attach onto it and start attacking it. The right wingers, they paid it no mind. You know what I'm saying? We were just using it amongst ourselves to mean what we know it meant, consciousness. But once the left wingers appropriated and started to use it for all of these other issues, that's when the right wingers went on alert and started doing what we see them doing with it now. And so we're getting caught in the crosshairs of that, in the crossfire of that, because we allowed it to be appropriated by the left wingers. We didn't say anything. We allowed them to water it down and use it for all these other issues without us saying, nah, hold up. That's our term. It don't got nothing to do with all this other stuff that y'all talking about. We didn't do that. We just allowed them to take it and do what they wanted to do with it. We divorced it. And then now it's being attacked by the right wing. So again, this is a fight between both sides of white supremacy. We the creators and innovators of everything. Okay. We had our own slang coming off the plantation, of course. We just talk the way that we talk. You know what I mean? That's just the way that we talk. It's just natural to us. So it goes beyond that. Harriet points to the role of mainstream newsroom in which Black people are still shockingly marginalized. When you see a Black journalist at a news organization or a media corporation, they seldom have any decision-making power. What we're talking about is white people concocting the way we understand language and the way we understand the current world. Very seldom is there any Black input. And well-meaning progressives, see, they let the so-called progressives off the hook. Well-meaning progressives. No, they're not well-meaning. They know what they're doing when they start watering down this term. They said well-meaning progressives who took on the woke label with gusto perhaps weren't fully embodying its true meaning in their casual embrace of the term. No, they know exactly what they were doing. It wasn't casual. It wasn't well-meaning. They know exactly what they were doing. They were bastardizing the term. They were watering it down intentionally. Excuse me, y'all. They know exactly what they were doing. This is what I mean. They try to put all of the negative stigma on the right wing and let the left wing off the hook. If y'all would have never did this, DeSantis wouldn't be out here talking about stop woke right now. If it wasn't for these so-called well-meaning progressives who took the woke label with gusto, perhaps weren't fully embodying its true meaning, in their casual embrace of the word. It wasn't a casual embrace of the word. It was another form of appropriation. It was an attack. They weaponized the term first. It's a very surface level descriptor of trying to claim that you're progressive, says Watson. It's much more complex than just saying, I'm liberal. If you're not trying to envision and make a better world for people, you're not as woke as you think you are, quote unquote. No, this was the beginning of the bastardization. These so-called progressives, they weaponized the term first. And now they're being attacked by the right-wing arm of white supremacy. And they're trying to shield themselves with us. They're trying to use blackness as a shield now. The progressives are saying, look, DeSantis is attacking blackness. When they say woke, they mean black. Come on, black people. We got to stop these evil white supremacists on the right. We can't allow DeSantis to do this. Don't come to Florida and all this dumb shit that they're saying. They're trying to throw black people up as a shield to protect these so-called progressives, these liberals. And we shouldn't allow them to do that, family. It's a very, let me read that again. It's a very surface level descriptor of trying to claim that you're progressive, says Watson. It's much more complex than just saying, I'm a liberal. If you're not trying to envision and make a better world for people, you're not as woke as you think you are. No, it has nothing, the term has nothing to do with being liberal. It has nothing to do with being progressive. It has everything to do with being black, with being conscious, with having knowledge of self as a black person, understanding racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works. That's what it means to be woke. Understanding racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works. That's what it means to be woke. It doesn't mean all of this other shit that y'all talking about. So what it means to stop woke. To some, woke is now a derisive stand-in for diversity, inclusion, empathy, and yes, blackness. They've used blackness as an after effect now. Woke is a derisive stand-in for diversity, inclusion, empathy, and yes, blackness. No. Blackness, 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 that's it, that's all. It ain't got nothing to do with nothing else. So when legislators pass a law to stop woke in light of the world's true history, in light of the words true history, as well as its commonly understood meaning, what are they really saying? Governor DeSantis' nefarious attack on truth, history, and public education cannot be masked by a fascist acronym. A fatuous acronym. I don't even know what that word means. Y'all go look it up. Mocking a black colloquialism. Janai S. Nelson, LDF's president and director counsel, emphasized in a press release announcing the organization's lawsuit challenging the Stop Woke Act. This law seeks to deprive future generations of knowledge, information, and ability to appreciate the humanity of their fellow citizens. It is also a direct, unlawful assault on the bedrock principle of free speech and democracy. The details of the law and the story behind its passage bear out its conclusion. It was passed against the will of a broad cross-section of Florida residents and students who testified to legislators about the harm it would cause in the state and to their community's efforts to challenge injustice. Notably, many of these initiatives were launched in the wake of the horrific deaths of George Floyd, a black man. All right, not Breonna Taylor, a black woman, Ahmaud Arbery, another black man, and far too many other black people due to police violence. Let me read that again. Notably, many of these initiatives were launched in the wake of the horrific deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and far too many black people due to the police violence. So this is a black issue. It ain't got nothing to do with LGBTQ. It ain't got nothing to do with feminism. It ain't got nothing to do with immigration. It ain't got nothing to do with Judaism, because they were saying part of his law was blocking some of the Jewish studies in the schools and all of that too. It ain't got nothing to do with none of that. It's black, point blank, period, full stop. Under the Stop Woke law, educators and institutions in Florida are already being restricted or restricting themselves out of fear from freely teaching students about many of the events and people that make up the history of this country. Indeed, even stories of American icons like Martin Luther King Jr., foundational Black American, are allegedly being banned from Florida's K-12 classrooms under this law. So again, they're pointing out the George Floyd stuff, the Breonna Taylor stuff, the Ahmaud Arbery stuff, Martin Luther King Jr. They're pointing out all of the Black stuff so that Black people can get in our feelings and be up in arms, and we'll be used as the shield for the left wing of white supremacy to be able to take ownership of the term woke so that they could push legislation and get resources for LGBTQ feminist groups and all of these other groups, and they ain't gonna do shit for Black people. That's the game that's being ran, family. God is in the nuances. We can't miss these details. In Harriet's view, the manipulation of woke has been key to affecting policies that, when looked at plainly, reveal a foundational hostility to values most Americans share. This includes recognizing and honoring icons who toiled to bring our nation closer to living up to its ideals of justice and fairness, where everyone can thrive and live without fear of being targeted for who they are. This includes recognizing and honoring icons who toiled to bring our nation closer to living up to its ideals of justice and fairness. Who are the Americans who did that? Who are the American icons who have continuously and consistently held this country up to its ideals of justice and fairness? Black people, full stop. You can't name no other icons outside of Black society who've been doing this. You can't name them. Everybody that you name is going to be Black. And Harriet's In Harriet's view, the manipulation of woke has been key to affecting policies that, when looked at, I just read that. It's hard to get people to demonize human beings and lives in history, but it's easy to get them to demonize a word. And if you can use that word as a placeholder for those people, for caring about those people, then it's easy to demonize instead of saying, we're just going to stop caring about people, Harriet concludes. He's on point with that. That is what the white supremacists on the right are doing. I agree with that. But we're not going to let the left wing off the hook, though. Watson agrees. When I think of political figures like DeSantis and the rampant fight against critical race theory, you are really trying to erase history and trying to erase knowledge that we need to grow better as a people. The fact that you are trying to hide these experiences all for the comfort of your white fragility is troubling, harmful, and most importantly, dangerous. And that's literally everything that woke goes against. All right, so boom. Let me go to this other piece over here. I told y'all they had mentioned, share this tab and close this. They had mentioned the writer from OK Player. They mentioned the writer from OK Player in that article, and I told y'all we was going to get into that in a second. So, the brother name is Elijah C. Watson. They were quoting him a lot in the article that I just read because he did a series of articles going back to 2017 where he was tracing the origins of the term woke. I'm going to read from one of those articles. I believe this is part 2. So there's a part 1 and a part 3. This is part 2 of 3 of the series that Elijah C. Watson wrote tracing the origins of the term woke. Excuse me. I want y'all to go check out the other 2 as well so you can get the full context of this. But just for the sake of this broadcast, I'm going to just use part 2. And so Elijah C. Watson, he serves as OK Player's news and cultural editor. And he's the author of this article here. Good article, by the way. 3 good articles. I read all 3 of them myself. He does a good job tracing the origins. That's the reason why they were borrowing so much from him in the article that I just read from that other news outlet. And just like I pointed out about the writer of that article being a non-FBA woman who was from Jamaica, only reason why I felt the main reason why I felt it was important to point that out, two reasons, is because we're talking about FBA colloquialism. And I feel like she tried to wedge in that 1923 quote from Marcus Garvey where he was saying, "Wake up, Ethiopia, wake up, Ethiopia." I feel like she tried to crowbar that into the lineage of the term. And I feel like her cultural ethnicity may have something to do with that. So that's the reason why I pointed that out. And so Elijah C. Watson, let me see if I can just look him up really quick. Let me see if they can give a quick. Elijah Watson, when he's not writing, he's listening to Sade and crying or watching My Hero Academia with his partner. So this is just a little bit about Elijah Watson. He's the news and culture editor for OK Player. It says when he's not writing, he's listening to Sade and crying or watching My Hero Academia with his partner. So not with his wife or his girlfriend, but with his partner. So I'll just leave that at that. I'll just leave that at that about Elijah. That's what they told us about who he was. He's either listening to Sade and crying, or he's chilling with his partner. Okay. So in the second installment of the Origin of Woke series, Elijah Watson highlights Georgia Ann Muldrow, the musician who introduced Erykah Badu to the word woke. Now, if y'all watched the Sunday broadcast, I was giving credit to that song with being responsible for the word becoming populated into our modern lexicon. The origin of what we're seeing now with the appropriation, with what we're seeing with the Stop Woke Act and all of that, the origin of all of that traces back to that 2008 song. But what I was saying was, by me, with my creative mind, you know what I'm saying, me being a musical creator myself, I reverse engineered the making of that song. And I was giving credit more so to Georgia Ann Muldrow, even though it's Erykah Badu's song and it's on Erykah Badu's album. I was saying, I thought, and it was just a conjecture, it was just really a guess, an educated guess, that Georgia Ann Muldrow was really responsible for the meat and potatoes of that song, and particularly the term "stay woke." I was giving her the credit. So let's check this article out. To be woke is to be black, quote unquote. I posit this thought to Georgia Ann Muldrow, one of the most forward-thinking musicians of our time, as we speak on the phone in early October. There is brief silence. Then, woke is definitely a black experience. Woke is if someone put a burlap sack on your head, knocked you out, and put you in a new location, and then you come to and understand where you are ain't home, and the people around you ain't your neighbors. They're not acting in a neighborly fashion. They're the ones who conked you on your head. You got kidnapped here, and then you got punked out of your own language, everything. That's woke. Understanding what your ancestors went through. Just being in touch with the struggle that our people have gone through here, and understanding we've been fighting since the very day we touched down here. There was no year where the fight wasn't going down. And so this is Georgia Ann Muldrow's description or definition of the term woke, which I give her credit for really popularizing, right? And so even with her description, it's a black thing. No, she didn't say anything about none of these other issues. She didn't say that it had anything to do with feminism or LGBTQism or any of these other stuff, right? She's talking about black history, right? So this is only one of many profound insights Muldrow offers on the idea of wokeness during our 2.5-hour talk and what's become and what it's become since she first uttered the word on Erykah Badu's Master Teacher a decade ago. Sure, she's happy to see the word woke become a rallying cry for resilience for Black people in America, but she also doesn't mince her words on wokeness becoming a performative trend for the masses in recent years. So this was in 2017. They're talking about this, y'all. So this is before DeSantis. She's already peeping game. So what is she talking about? Because in 2017, there wasn't no stop woke movement. The right wingers weren't using the term as a pejorative yet. So what was Georgia Ann Muldrow talking about in 2017 when he said she doesn't mince her words on wokeness becoming a performative trend for the masses in recent years? She's talking about how the left wing was already watering it down. Most people who are woke ain't calling themselves woke, she said. Most people who are woke are agonizing inside, Muldrow says. They're too busy being depressed to call themselves woke. We weren't calling ourselves woke. Yeah, we were using the term as it fit appropriately, but we weren't saying, I'm woke. I'm part of the woke community. There's no woke community, right? It's the Black community. And that's just happened to be one of the terms that we use to describe part of our condition. So I could have called Muldrow to talk about a number of topics such as her storied career or multiple collaborative albums with partner Dudley Perkins, but I wanted to talk about the word woke and her role in introducing it to the mainstream. Good call. I give him credit on that. Good call for chopping it up with her. She's the right person to talk to, in my opinion. I embarked on this journey to discover the origins of the word woke because of the uniqueness and its present ubiquity, considering its past is shrouded in mystery. But I also hope to highlight the erasure of the people who invented it in its political and racial context, Black people. He's right. I started this journey researching the work of Harlem author William Melvin Kelly, who is credited with coining woke in 1962 New York Times essay, "If You're Woke, You Dig It," and traced this use to Badu's Master Teacher almost 5 decades later. As important as the word is to our current, so now let's pay attention here too. So this brother, who first, and back in 2017, was tracing the origins of the term woke, he arrived at this 1962 article. He didn't talk about what Marcus Garvey said in 1923. He didn't trace it back to that. He traced it back to this 1962 article. Now, I will say that it seems like he did miss the 1940 usage of it with the Scottsboro Boys song. I think that was valid to include in the origin story of the term. And there was another earlier usage that was pointed out in the article that I read earlier. So I think he missed a couple by stopping at the 1962 article, but I digress. As important as the word is to our current political state, it is also important to understand the word's ties to Blackness. The word that was passed from one Black person to another, expanding its reach from the streets of Harlem to the West Coast and eventually into the airways of mass consumption, making Muldrow an integral part of woke's story. Agree. Georgia Ann Muldrow's life story begins in Los Angeles, California, where she was born to a musical home. Ronald Muldrow and Ricky Bayers Beckwith, her father, mother, respectively, are acclaimed musicians, with the two having worked with Eddie Harris, Pharoah Sanders, Roland Hanna, and others. In the early 2000s, Muldrow relocated to New York City to attend New York University, where she enrolled in the school's jazz program. She met the peers who would become her frequent collaborators, including Bilal, Robert Glasper, and the Harlem alto saxophonist who indirectly introduced her to woke, Lakeisha Benjamin. So Lakeisha Benjamin, they said, indirectly introduced her to woke. Now, earlier I was talking about, yes, we were using the term, but it's just the way that we talk. So we weren't using it in the same way that we came to use it after the song. But we would often use it just in our vernacular because that's just the way that we talk. And so they kind of explain it here with this, where they said she indirectly introduced her to woke, this Lakeisha Benjamin. So the way she would use the phrase is like, I'm trying to stay woke because I'm tired, or I was trying to stay woke, but I was bored, Mojo recalls. It was Keisha talking about how she was trying to stay up, like literally not pass out. So she wasn't using it to mean consciousness. She wasn't using it in no political way or nothing. It's just the way that we talk. She was tired and she said she was trying to stay woke, right? And so what happens? What does Mojo do with the term now? As an homage to Benjamin, Mojo, who had created her own T-shirt with the words "Stay woke" writing in the marker over her heart. But the phrase came to embody Mojo's relentless work ethic and desire to find and love herself while on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So she adopted it from her friend because I guess she just thought it was funny the way she was saying "stay woke" about her being tired. And she made it into a T-shirt, and then it became part of her work as a musician. You know what I mean? To describe her work ethic and her desire to find and love herself. So it became one of her mantras about just learning about herself, the internal work that she was doing on herself and how that intertwined with her art. She began to use that term in that way, right? So it still wasn't political yet. It still wasn't about social justice and all of these things yet, right? It was about her personal journey in her art, right? So she says, I had a lot of sleep deprivation at the time. I literally stayed up. So she couldn't sleep. She was suffering from sleep depression. Mojo says, my self-esteem was really bad. I felt like if I wasn't productive, I wasn't shit. I felt like the only thing I was good for was making music. And if I could be doing that all the time, then I really had to face myself. If I couldn't be doing that all the time, then I really had to face myself. So she was using music in her art as an escape from dealing with whatever turmoil, internal turmoil that she was facing, right? So Mojo's hectic work ethic ultimately took a toll on her. This, along with the September 11th terrorist attacks, resulted in her returning to Los Angeles. Mojo was reserved in discussing the incident during our conversation, but shortly after, I discovered through an old press release for one of her shows that she was in the area when the attack occurred. She was on a subway crossing underneath the World Trade Center when the first plane crashed into the North Tower of the building that morning. However, little did Mojo know she was, the bearer of a coastal cultural exchange. The West Coast was about to get introduced to her theory of wokeness. So she was living in New York. Her friend Benjamin used to say, I'm trying to stay woke because she was tired. She took that phrase, put it on a T-shirt, started to use it in her art to describe the inner turmoil that she was going through and the sleep depression, the sleep deprivation that she was suffering and all of that. And so the 9/11 happens, and that's part of the reason why she left New York to go to Los Angeles now. Boom, that's where we at. So upon returning to Los Angeles, Mojo paired with Debias, Ross G, and Sarah creative partners, the latter of whom she'd originally written Master Teacher for in 2005 for the trio's unreleased third album, Black Fuzz. The song marks the entry of Stay Woke into the musical mainstream will ultimately find Badu in the throes of her own creative purge. So originally, she wrote the song for her and her group Sarah, but the album was never released. That was in 2005. And so I guess this is part of the original one. Or is that Badu right there on the mic? I'm not sure. But I'm not going to play it because I don't want to get no strikes on the video. But by 2005, Badu was a Grammy Award-winning commercial and critical success, having earned the title of Queen of Neo Soul. But the title, as sincere as it seemed, simplified Badu to a typecast, an unk ring and head wrap wearing, candle and incense lighting Black woman whose personal life, particularly her romantic relationships with the likes of Andre 3000 and Common, was beginning to take precedence over her creative life in the public eye. I don't know about that, but whatever. Suffering through a string of writer's block, Badu took a break from recording music and instead focused on her family, namely her new daughter Puma, Rose, who was born the July prior. But by the end of the year, Badu was working on music again. She received her first computer from Questlove as a Christmas gift and began receiving music from Jay Dilla and Q-Tip. This, along with her introduction to Apple's GarageBand digital audio workstation by her son Seven, incited a creative spark in Badu. I could be here in my own space with the headphones on, and the kids could be doing what they're doing, and I'm cooking dinner still, making juices still, and it's so easy to just sing. She said in 2008 New York Times story, you got an idea, boom, idea, boom. So throughout 2005, Badu had composed more than 75 songs intended for what would ultimately become her 2 New America albums. In the process, she traveled across the country to work on the tracks. Luminous Sound Recording in Dallas, Electric Lady Studios in New York City, and Sarah Cosmic Dust Studios in Los Angeles, where Badu and Modro met for the first time. So now Badu and Modro meet each other at the studio. We had Georgia at the house one day, and it just so happened that Badu came through. Amos Keith said in an issue of now defunct British music magazine, Shook. Erica heard Georgia's song and was loving it. Badu kept asking about Georgia, and then we were like, we got this song, Master Teacher. And then she was like, I want that song. So they already had the song. It was intended for the Sarah album. Erykah Badu meets Modro. She's interested in her. She starts asking about her. They told her about the song Master Teacher, played it for her. She said, I want that song. Next time Modro would hear Master Teacher would be when it appeared on Badu's 2008 album, New America Part 1, The Fourth World War. By then, Modro was no longer frequenting the Cosmic Dust studio and was living with her mother after having a nervous breakdown shortly after the song's completion. I felt like my heart was crying out, Modro admits. My mama had to pick me up from Sarah's place and take me back to her house so I could get mentally stable again. According to Modro, the final version of the Master Teacher was a drastic departure from the original. Unlike the psychedelic futuristic funk of the former, the latter was more minimal and subdued. Modro compares the song to an African chant. But the biggest revelation she offers about the track may very well be that she wasn't singing, I stay woke, but I'd stay woke on the chorus. I wasn't claiming that I was woke, Modro says. I never saw myself as woke. I saw myself as aspiring for woke, to try and stay woke, but I knew I wasn't woke. Listening to Master Teacher, the admittance reflects the themes of self-discovery and growth present on the track. I've been in the search of something new. I've been in search of myself. It's just too hard for me to find. I'm in the search of something new. Modro sings on the first verse. But the beauty of Master Teacher was the declaration of I stay woke, that she attained the self she was searching for. But I'd stay woke implies something else, that she's still searching, striving for that new self. It's rare for Modro to listen to Master Teacher because of how raw the song is for her. A Black woman trying to assure and support her people while simultaneously trying to help herself. This divide manifested in Master Teacher. Modro purged through the song, so much so that she had to leave it. Even now, over a decade later, she still finds it difficult to return to. Maybe in Modro's purging, Badu saw herself, which is why she wanted Master Teacher. Both were enduring the same internal struggle, two creatives in search of something new. But in meeting one another, Badu and Modro seemed to find that something new they were looking for, a serendipitous moment that ultimately transformed into a bond of sisterhood. Erica has been the person, this is the quote from Modro, Erica has been the person to single-handedly be consistent in shaping the aesthetic for the sisters. She single-handedly did that, and she didn't have to, Modro says. What she helped to do was really something. I'm really honored to have been a guest on her record. It's interesting that she says that. She's honored to have been a guest on Erykah Badu's record, but really, to me, and I've said this before, I knew this. I didn't know this before this morning. I just read this article this morning, but I told y'all on Sunday that just from me listening to the record, I thought Erykah Badu was a guest on the record, even though it's her song on her album. I'm like, nah, whoever this Georgia Modro sister is, she made up this song. She came up with this concept. I just instinctively knew that from loving the song and listening to the song and analyzing the song. I didn't have to be this decorated journalist like Mr. Watson, who's doing this article, to do all of this research and actually get an interview from the actual artist to get this revelation. It was revealed to me by the cosmos. It was revealed to me by the ethers. You know what I mean? I already understood this without doing all of this research. But the research is on point, though, and this is great confirmation for the hunch that I had. Since Master Teacher's release, Stay Woke's fate has been unfortunate but uninspiring. No, unsurprising, I'm sorry. Like anything created by Black people, the phrase was appropriated by the masses, transformed into a trend term before ultimately mutating into a meme and becoming a form of irony. The phrase's end arguably came in July last year when an episode of Jeopardy! Stay Woke category was included. However, the topic was centered around the literal definition of woke instead of questions related to social justice. The moment was a sobering representation of the continual mishandling of Blackness in America. Our culture is treated as a trend. But for Black people to stay woke is anything but. It's a fucking lifestyle for us. Each and every day, having to be aware that because of the color of your skin, you could legally be defined as someone's property. You could be shot and hung for allegedly talking to or whistling at a woman. You could be arrested and placed in one of the most dangerous jails in the country for a crime you never committed. Woke was simultaneously a cool and militant descriptor for our experience, a word that channeled our reality into something empowering. Now it's gone. And so, okay, let me continue. I spoke with Modro again for the first week of November. She sounded distraught, her voice shaking as she told me about the incident that took place just before our phone call. Okay, that's the end of the article. She's talking about something that happened, some racial incident that happened before the phone call had happened, but that's not really relevant to this particular conversation right here. Not particularly. But what I wanted to point out about this article, right? And let me go here. Let me stop sharing. And let me get back to this layout here. All right. So what I wanted to point out about that article was this. The article is well researched, is very on point. I agree with the research and the sentiment around the term woke and how it became a popular term and descriptor for our experience as Black people. He's all the way on point with that. But I pointed out the thing that was written in his bio about who, what's his name again? Mr. Watson is. And they talked about him having a partner, implying that he's LGBTQ, right? And the reason why I wanted to point that out is because I feel like that's left out of the article. So he does a great job of saying, listen, this is the term that began with Blackness. Remember, this article was written before this whole Stop Woke DeSantis thing. The right-wingers weren't appropriating it yet. And so he's pointing out accurately and appropriately that this term has been hijacked. Something that began with Blackness has been hijacked, which he says by the mainstream. but he's not pointing out the guilty parties. And I think that perhaps his sexuality has something to do with that, because it is the LGBT community who was the first guilty party to hijack the term and begin watering it down. He doesn't point that out. He doesn't point out the guilty parties who have done this. What's up? I'm about to be done. He doesn't point this out. And so I feel like that is being omitted from the article, and we can't have that. That's dangerous. That's dangerous, because what happens is now that article is being used, because the first article that I read, they kept referencing his article, and that article is being used, you know, in this fight between the left and the right over the appropriate use of the term. And both of them are guilty of misappropriating the term. And so what we have to do as the Black grassroots community is we have to take back ownership of the term, and we have to control the narrative. Let's stop abandoning these things that we come up with and just allowing people to take it and run with it. Let's put the gates up around our culture, our language, the trends that we set, because these things have power and can be used for our benefit, towards our empowerment. The same way that it can be weaponized and used to our detriment. If we maintain the ownership of it and we control the narrative, then we can use it for our empowerment. And so that's the moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen. That's the whole reason why I wanted to do this part 2 and give y'all an update from the broadcast that we did on Sunday. And so if you didn't see Sunday's broadcast, go back and check out Sunday's broadcast with me and Nicety Girl. We broke this thing down, and I gave it to y'all off the top of the dome. I gave y'all the origins of the term off the top of the dome, just based on my own experience being a Black man who is woke, who is conscious, who is paying attention to how these things have taken place and progressed. You know what I mean? And so when I woke up this morning and Nicety sent me that tweet, I was like, this is interesting. And so I went and found those articles based on the tweet that she sent me. You know, that tweet sent me down a little rabbit hole where I discovered these articles, which I wasn't aware of prior, which gave confirmation to a lot of what I was saying on Sunday's broadcast. You know what I'm saying? And so that's it, man. That's the only reason why I wanted to come to y'all this morning. And so now I got to get off of here and go get started with my day. Y'all have a great day, man. Y'all make sure y'all have a productive day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Remember, I'm not the master teacher. I'm only the master student. And with that being said, I'm out of here, family. Peace and Black love.
Do for self or suffer the consequences. The wisdom of Elijah's inside of the conscience.